Let's talk about death, baby.
That is not how that song goes.
Spinderella, shut it up one time. Hello, friends and fellow seekers. Today we're going to be talking about what happens after we die. And I know the general consensus out there in the world is that no one knows, but I'm going to play devil's advocate and say I think we have an inkling, because when we idea sex between different cultures, thinkers, and disciplines, we find that so many have come to the same conclusion, whether they are mystics and prophets or modern doctors and psychologists. So, this video is the first in a series exploring the very compelling evidence for life after death. In fact, once we have all the evidence laid out on the table, we're going to make a case that death is a misnomer. Death is not annihilation, it is not an ending, it is a transition. In other words, there is life after life. Oh, you can't see that, can you? Here. Hello and welcome to Idea Sex, where we take an analytical lens to mysticism and spirituality. My name is Kiara. That is my dragon, Odrasso, the Rabbit Slayer.
Rabbit Slayer? How dare thee, witch! I will eat you.
You can't. You're nailed to my wall.
I will make a snack of you yet.
Bitch, I am a snack. In any case, whether it's death by dragon, death by burpee, death by old age, death by Colonel Mustard in the kitchen with a wrench, we all end up in the same place. And the question becomes, where is that? We may not be able to pin it on a map just yet, but when we cross-reference a lot of this as of yet unexplainable phenomena, we get a sense of what might exist on the other side. And so I want to start this conversation with NDEs, or near-death experiences. I don't think this is the single most compelling evidence for life after death. I think that on its own, we could poke all kinds of holes in it. But when we take NDEs into consideration with things like past life recall, hypnotherapy, and the science of consciousness, we start to get an image. They're like these little puzzle pieces that taken together give us an idea of what might happen after we die. And so I want to start the conversation with NDEs, not because this is the single most compelling evidence, but because most people have at least heard of an NDE. And we have this man to thank, Raymond A. Moody, in his book, Life After Life. So if Monroe is the granddaddy of the out-of-body experience, Moody is the granddaddy of the near-death experience. That's just what happens. People come up with an area of study or an interest, and they are initiated into granddaddyhood. Straight up G's. So Raymond Moody, in his book Life After Life, started to collect the stories of people who had strange experiences when they were clinically dead, meaning their brains were offline, their hearts were offline, they were dead, but they had conscious experiences. And when he started researching this, in I think it was 1968, he was very much a skeptic and an atheist, and now he's neither. He's still studying this stuff. This was published in the 70s, I think, but Moody is still studying near-death experiences, and he is now one of many. He may have founded the field, but today you can find dozens of nonprofit organizations, usually, that are researching NDEs. And so this is where it started. And in this book, he only had about 150 case studies at the time, but he compared these stories and found 13 common elements, things ranging from seeing a being of light to the experience of being out of one's body. And so we're going to take a look at these 13 key characteristics of a near-death experience, keeping in mind that no two NDEs are alike, but these are often what people would experience. Number one, ineffability, meaning it's inexpressible. People have a really difficult time communicating their near-death experience. It's something that just transcends words, like so many mystical experiences do as well. These things sort of just transcend language. And part of that seems to be from the stories that are shared, because you're moving from essentially a three-dimensional space to something multi-dimensional. You're moving from your 3D form, right, this physical body, this incarnation, to something that we would call multi-dimensional. And so people have a very difficult time describing what that's like. One woman said, Now, there's a real problem for me as I'm trying to tell you this because all the words I know are three-dimensional. I have to describe it to you in words that are three-dimensional. That's as close as I can get to it, but it's not really adequate. I can't give you a complete picture. 2, hearing the news. So end ears. People who die and come back often hear their doctor announce their death. Number 3, feelings of peace and quiet. So it's often a blissful experience for people. Number 4, I lost count. I think we're on number 4, the noise. When people die, in many cases, various unusual auditory sensations are reported to occur at or near death, and people describe this as a ringing, a humming, a buzzing, like a rushing noise. And what I think is so interesting is in comparing these accounts to some of these other books, it appears they're describing the same noise. So Robert A. Monroe in Journeys Out of the Body also describes a buzzing noise or a ringing noise when he is learning how to exit his body. And Michael Newton in Journey of Souls describes the exact same noise. Now, these people may have been contemporaries. As far as I know, they weren't running in the same circles, but I think that it's interesting that was one of the parallels between their work. And actually, number 5 is too. Number 5 is the dark tunnel. And this is after people die, and often when they're hearing that noise, they are pulled through space, like a vacuum or a void, some kind of enclosure. And this is also described by both Monroe and Newton. And what this reminds me of is shamanic journeying. So if you're not familiar, shamanism has existed in cultures all over the world for millennia. A lot of people hear shaman and they think Native American, but it actually has existed pretty much everywhere for as long as humans have been here. And what's so interesting is that shaman have the same cosmology regardless of what culture they come from, even before these cultures had contact with one another. So either there's some truth to what they're saying, or it's just so deeply embedded in the human psyche. So one of the things a shaman does is they enter an altered state of consciousness in order to move between dimensions, allegedly. And one of the areas in their cosmology is the upper world. They all have to pass through a portal in order to go to the upper world, but the way they perceive that portal depends on their culture, on their environment. And so, for example, a Siberian shaman would ride a tendril of smoke up the chimney of his yurt to ascend to the upper world. My people, the Vikings and the Celts, would climb the branches of a great tree and pierce the heavens. And then the Aboriginals would ascend the Rainbow Bridge. So they were all doing these things that took them upward. But how they perceived that portal very much depended on their culture. And I'm seeing something similar with this dark tunnel. So it reminds me of shamanic journeying in the sense that they're all experiencing the same kind of portal, but the way they perceive it is perhaps different. Number 6, out of the body. So sometimes when people have NDEs, they will describe a feeling of becoming pure consciousness, like a drop of water going back into an ocean. But more often, people will describe having a second body, what Moody calls the spiritual body, what Monroe calls the second body, what philosophers have called the astral body. And the way that it is described in Moody sounds pretty much identical to what is described by Monroe. Number 7, meeting others. This can include deceased friends, family, helpers. Moody calls them helpers, Monroe calls them helpers, Newton calls them guides or spirit guides, which is what I think most people today are familiar with calling them. Number 8, this is probably my favorite, is the being of light. It's basically a ball of light that appears to people and radiates unconditional love and acceptance. And it appears to people in different ways. Like some people perceive it as a religious figure or a deity, but most commonly it appears as a brilliant light. The love and warmth which emanate from this being to the dying person are utterly beyond words, and he feels completely surrounded by it and taken up by it, completely at ease and accepted in the presence of this being. And if this is starting to sound like a Hallmark card, wait until we get to number 9, which is the review. Number 9?
Number 9, number 9, number 9.
So sometimes this light being will be the one to facilitate a life review. May not always be facilitated by the light, but often NDEers will experience some kind of play-by-play of their life. So important moments or formative moments, things they experienced when they were alive. And this is an excerpt from a woman who was guided by the ball of light. He was trying to show me something in each one of these flashbacks. It's not like he was trying to see what I had done. He knew that already, but he was picking out these certain flashbacks of my life and putting them in front of me so that I would have to recall them. All through this, he kept stressing the importance of love. He seemed very interested in things concerning knowledge too. And I thought that was so interesting because I've read very similar things by other NDE researchers. So I think it was in the Lisa Smart book where she, in looking at the kinds of questions that people were asked when they died, came to the conclusion that we're here to learn two things: how to love and be loved unconditionally, and to grow our knowledge. So, and actually, who was it? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I think, said something similar. She was a Swiss psychiatrist. She gave us the 5 stages of grief and said something to the effect of we're here to learn, or we're here to expand our capacity for love. Number 10 is the border or the limit. And this is like, it could be a fence across a field. It might be like a misty kind of border. It could literally just be a door. And this appears most often to people who have been dead for quite a long time. People have been revived even up to 30 minutes after their death, but typically it'll only be a few minutes when you can get them back to life. But with people who stayed in that state of consciousness longer, they'll often encounter this border or limit, and they describe it as this feeling that if they go through that, then there is no coming back. Okay, so number 10 is coming back, and that is re-entering into the body. Most people don't remember this. Most people just remember not wanting to come back. Like they experience the other side and they're like, nah, fuck that earth place. That place is whack. I'm staying over here where we're all like one and holding hands and singing Kumbaya. But the re-entry, most people don't remember it. Those who do say that they come in through their head, which is a lot like what we read in Newton when he says that people who exit their body come out through their head. So through presumably their crown chakra. 12, telling others. People struggle to relay these near-death experiences. They're afraid of judgment. They're afraid their friends and family are going to think they're crazy. And a lot of times they just don't even have the words to describe what it is that happened to them. Number 13, last but not least, is the effect on lives. So what happened to these people after they came back? There is a remarkable agreement in the lessons, as it were, which have been brought back by these close encounters with death. Almost everyone has stressed the importance in this life of trying to cultivate love for others, a love of a unique and profound kind. One man who met the being of light felt totally loved and accepted even while his whole life was displayed in a panorama for the being to see. He felt that the question that the being was asking him was whether he was able to love others in the same way. He now feels that it is his commission while on earth to try and learn to be able to do so. I don't know. I can maybe love puppies that way and plants. I don't know about people, but power to you, my dude. There you have it, the 13 common themes of a near-death experience according to Moody's research. And I don't know about you, but I'm not convinced. Like, I think this is interesting. I enjoyed reading it, but this is a possibility, but it feels a little wobbly to me. So next week, we're going to take a look at what I think is the most compelling evidence for life after death, because NDEs are just the tip of the iceberg. So if you're curious and want to tumble down the rabbit hole a little further, do subscribe, and I will see you next week when we will talk about past life recall. Until then, stay blessed.